This 8th set of lecture videos is going to cover topics relating to properties of matter. The goals for this chapter are to describe the properties of matter and describe the properties of solids, liquids, and gases. The first topic we are going to cover are some basics about properties of matter. To start with, we need to go through a few definitions. Matter is anything that occupies space and has mass. An element is a substance that cannot be separated into simpler substances. Some examples of elements are sodium, aluminum, and chlorine. All of these can be found on the periodic table of elements. A compound is a substance that contains two or more elements. Some examples of compounds are sodium chloride and lithium bromide. A molecule is the smallest particle of an element that can exist in a free state and still retain the characteristics of that element or compound. To get a sense of how large a molecule is, most molecules are around 3 × 10⁻⁻10 meters in diameter. The last definition we will look at is an atom, which is the smallest particle of an element that can exist in a stable or independent state. Now that we know some basic definitions, we will take a closer look at some examples of molecules. Remember, a molecule is the smallest particle of an element or compound that retains the characteristics of that compound. On the left, we have a water molecule. The water molecule is composed of 2 hydrogen atoms in white and 1 oxygen atom in red to make H2O. On the right, the sugar or glucose molecule is composed of 6 carbon atoms in black, 12 hydrogen atoms in white, and 6 oxygen atoms in red to make C6H12O6. Let's talk about a couple more details relating to atoms. It is important to note that not all atoms are the same size. Remember, an atom is the smallest particle of an element that can exist in an independent state. The hydrogen atom is the smallest atom. It has a diameter of roughly 6 × 10⁻11 meters and a mass of 1.67 × 10⁻27 kilograms. The picture on the left is a hydrogen atom which only has 1 electron. On the right, we have uranium, which is one of the heaviest atoms. Uranium has a mass of 3.96 × 10⁻25 kilograms. Even though uranium is one of the heaviest atoms, you can see that its mass is still quite small. If you take an atom and break it apart, you will end up with protons, neutrons, and electrons, which are all subatomic particles. We won't go into too much detail with subatomic particles, rather we will just look at some of their basics. The first subatomic particle that we will take a quick look at is the proton. The mass of a proton is 1.673 × 10⁻27 kilograms. The diameter of a proton is 8.2 × 10⁻16 meters, so they are extremely small. This makes sense because a proton has to be smaller than the atom. The charge on a proton is +1. A neutron has roughly the same mass and diameter as a proton. The neutron does not have a charge. It has a neutral charge, or 0, like its name suggests. An electron is much smaller than the proton and neutron. Electrons have a mass of 9.109 × 10⁻31 kilograms. Because electrons don't have any kind of internal structure, you can think of their diameter as 0. They exist as a point charge, and electrons have a charge of -1. The nucleus is the center of an atom. Protons and neutrons are located in the nucleus, while electrons surround the nucleus in a cloud. However, you can think of the electrons as having a very specific path that they have to follow. The number of protons you have determines which element you have. In this picture, there are 6 protons, 6 neutrons, and 6 electrons. The 6 protons tells us that this atom is carbon. For our purposes, we aren't going to do much else specifically with atoms in the periodic table. That information is saved for a chemistry class. This concludes our discussion on the basic definitions and subatomic particles.